Class, and welcome to our introductory lesson 5.0, which is a quick trig review, and we do this after you've done your inquiry from your last test. All right, so remember, whenever we do trigonometry, we've got to make sure that our calculator is in degree mode, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so how could you tell if it's in degree mode? Look on your screen. It should be a little D in a box or DEG on your screen. That's how you can tell if you're in degree mode. DEG or just a little D. Okay. So just remember that we've been working with trig last couple of years. So yes, since grade 10, so just last year, and we're going to be finding some values. So we just plug them in our calculator, and it says for number 1 to find these values to 3 decimal places. All right. So what we're going to do, and you have to decide on your calculator, do you press sign and then 23 degrees? If you have a 2-level or a nice displayed calculator, which most of you do, you're just going to plug it in as is. But if you have one of the older calculators, you might have to go 23 and then press sign. And your answer here should be for the first one. So for A, you should have 0.391. Okay, plugging in the second one, B, tan 32 degrees, you should get 0.625. And the third one, C, if you plug in cos 82, actually plug it in your calculator, make sure you can do this, guys, 0.139. Great. Number 2 says to find the angles to the nearest degree. Remember the trick with trig, when you're finding the angles, you have to use the inverse buttons. And inverse buttons either means you're pressing second or shift to get what's called the sine inverse, cos inverse. So you either need to have the second button or the shift button, and then you press cosine or tan, depending on which one you're doing. So to find the angle here, angle A equals the sine inverse of this fraction 5/7. So for most of you, you're going to go second sine, opening bracket, 5 divided by 7, closing bracket. But if you have the old school calculator, you go 5 divided by 7 equals second sine. And if we're rounding to the nearest degree, you should get an angle for A being 46 degrees. Okay? Taking a look at the second example, tan B equals 2.3/5. Again, we want to find angle B, so that equals the tan inverse of that fraction, 2.3 divided by 5. Angle B, if you plug it in your calculator, should give you 25 degrees. Okay, just making sure you know that's a 25 degrees. Okay. All right, C part. To find angle C, that equals the cos inverse of 11/17. Plug that in your calculator. Angle C equals 50 degrees. All right. For the third part, we're going to take a look at using SOHCAHTOA to find the missing angle or side. Just remember, folks, SOHCAHTOA goes in order. This tells us the first one is the sine ratio compares the opposite length divided by the hypotenuse length. The second part of our SOHCAHTOA is the cosine law, and it compares the adjacent side over or divided by the hypotenuse. And lastly, the TOA part is the tangent ratio, and it compares the opposite over the adjacent. All right, let's take a look at 3 examples here to get us ready. All right, looking at A, we look at the angle of reference, which is angle 38. And according to that, X is what we call the opposite side. It's furthest away, so opposite the angle of reference. And 10 is the adjacent side. The blank side up here, folks, where I've got the dot, that's the hypotenuse side, but there's no information in there, so I'm not even going to write it out. So then I go back to SOHCAHTOA and I say what ratio or which one of the trios has an O and an A in it. And you'll see that that's tangent. So you know that tan theta equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So let's sub in what we know. Tan of 38 degrees equals the opposite side, which is x, divided by 10. Now to get x by itself, when it's on the top, you cross multiply. So 1 times x is x equals the other cross, which is 10 times tan 38, which is 10 tan 38. Okay, and then you just plug that in the calculator, 10 tan 38. Or if you have the old calculator, you might want to go 38 tan times 10. Okay, and if we round it to 1 decimal place, that's going to be 7.8 centimeters. Good. Let's take a look at our second example, folks. This time we're finding the angle. So that's going to be the angle of reference. That's the one we're trying to find. So what sides do we have going across? We have the opposite. And the 12 is our hypotenuse because it's opposite the 90 degree. What ratio in SOHCAHTOA has O and H in it? And you'll find that it's the sine. So sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, let's sub in what we know. We know sine theta equals opposite, which is 7, divided by 12. Now this is just like the example above where we have to find the angle. So we have to remember to do the sine inverse of 7 over 12 equals theta, or you could do theta equals, it's up to you, theta equals sine -1 divided by 7 over 12, whichever way you like to work. Theta equals 36 degrees, rounded to the nearest degree. Let's try this last one here, and this one's a little harder, and I'll show you why in a minute or two. Okay? So looking at this example, folks, here's our angle of reference. X is in what we call the hypotenuse side because it's opposite the 90 degree, and 4 is the adjacent side. Looking at SOHCAHTOA, the ratio that has an O and an H in it that compares those two side lengths is the cosine. So we're going to have cos of theta, that angle we're going to sub in a second, equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that the order is important. So that's why SOHCAHTOA, you write it down C-A-H. It's in order. Okay? Now let's sub in the information we know. We know that it's the cos of 21 degrees equals the adjacent side, which is 4 inches, divided by the hypotenuse, which is x. Now this is a little different case, folks. When we go to cross multiply here, x is actually on the bottom. So if we cross multiply, we've got x times cos of 21 equals 4. Now if we want to get x by itself, currently it's being multiplied by cos 21, so we have to do the opposite, which is divide by cos 21. Whatever you do to one side, you do the same to the other. These will cancel out, so x equals 4 divided by cosine of 21 degrees. Plug it in your calculator as is, and you're going to get x equals approximately 4.3 inches. Just remember, folks, it's imperial, so we don't have decimals, so x equals 4 3/10, you could say, or make it 2/12 or something like that. Doesn't really matter as long as you don't leave it as a decimal. Now, folks, I want to show you a shortcut that you can use. You may have remembered this from grade 10. Okay, this is called a shortcut. I'm sorry, if I could spell, let me fix that up. So shortcut. So if x is on the bottom, so we go cos of 21 degrees equals 4 over x. When x is on the bottom, we know we eventually are going to multiply these two together, but then we're actually going to divide. So I'm just going to do what's called a switch. So you may remember that. So x equals 4 divided by cos of 21 degrees. It just avoids you having to divide both sides. Just happens to have it, just avoid you dividing both sides. So it saves a line. Okay? And then you would get your answer. X equals 4 3/10 of an inch. All right, folks, that's a little review. Hopefully you understand how to use your calculator, what methods to use, just a reminder to use the inverse buttons when you're finding an angle, and that we use SOHCAHTOA when we've got a 90-degree triangle and we have two pieces of information and we can find the third. It could either be an angle or a side or both of them. Again, if you have two sides and you need to find the third, you could also use Pythagorean theorem. All right, so that's just a little bit of an intro into grade 11 trig. It's really the review from grade 10. And we'll be seeing you next day to actually get some work done with homework. So there's no official homework here. It's just an intro to make sure that you've got your calculator working correctly and you know what buttons to press. So have a great day, guys, and we'll see you next day.